Seen lots of selling texts over the years and really haven't seen a lot of guys that are great at follow-up. Universally, they're just not great at follow-up. They're ready for today's 2 or 3 calls or whatever you're going to give them. And, they're not concentrating so much on what they quoted yesterday and didn't sell. That's just a mindset shift that has to happen there. If you're selling $2 or $3 million a month, that means that you have $3-4 million in quoted work that you didn't sell. Just working your book is just so critical.
Welcome to the Waste No Day podcast, a podcast specifically for and about the home services industry as it relates to plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and electrical. More than a podcast, Waste No Day is a credo, a determination, a mindset. It is a never-ending discipline. It is a refuse to lose pursuit. It is a wake-up call every morning to waste no day. Now here's your hosts, Brian Burton and Nate Minnick.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Waste No Day podcast. Your hosts, Nate and Brian, hanging out with you once again. Welcome here to the show and hope that your year is already off to a great start. We have a great start for you with this podcast. We are inviting Lawrence Castillo to be in your passenger seat. This guy is a mountain's worth of education and information about the home services industry, and it's going to be great. Before we do that, as we always do, we're going to spend a little bit of time breaking it down for you ourselves. And to that, we turn to Brian for our quote.
A man who reads too much and uses his own brain too little falls into lazy habits of thinking. Albert Einstein.
Wow. From the thinker himself.
Yeah, tough love there, huh?
Okay. Yeah, a little introspective.
I think it was Andrew Carnegie. Maybe it wasn't. It was somebody on that level who said thinking is the hardest and highest paying job in the world. And most people would rather die than do it.
Ooh.
And it always stands out to me because we get in these, modes of, how it is. We do it here. We're doing everything right. No point in really breaking down and dissecting our processes and our performance and trying to get better and, innovating things. Instead of doing, we pride ourselves on innovation. Like it's what we pat ourselves on the back for. We're constantly looking at everything we do and going, how can we do this more strategically? But sometimes we just get in these ruts where we're cool, everything's fine. And apply thinking to that to break ourselves out of it. But boy, how easy is it, especially when you're listening to just an amazing podcast like Waste No Day, if I say so myself.
Sure, yeah.
Where you're drinking from a fire hydrant, you're just trying to get sips out of this massive waterfall. And it's really easy to, just tickle your intellect with everything you hear, but it can be tough to pick one thing to take action on. And this episode is going to be that.
That's right.
Lawrence and I spent some time on the phone and now text each other pretty often. He's like, the dude's just a beast. I mean, he's come up under Jim Abrams and Leland Smith, and he's friends with Ken Goodrich. They have Ken's been a mentor for him. So like the best who have ever done it, arguably in the industry are his mentors and people he worked for directly. And every time I get to talk to him, I'm like, I want to be someone who brings something to the table too. So like, here's something that I have to offer, but I feel like, I'm giving shekels to a king in a way. He's just, vastly more knowledgeable than me. So I'm trying to drink from that fire hydrant.
Right.
But where do you start, man? I have a conversation with him like the one before this episode, and I'm just like, I had to hang up the phone and sit back and stare at the ceiling for a minute. Please, nobody ask me a question or want me to do anything because I'm going to lose everything we just talked about. But you throw a dart at the dartboard of all the ideas and you just pick something like, I'm going to work. Here we go. This is the thing.
I think you're right, Brian. And the danger of these types of seminars or sessions or podcasts is the flood of information. and then not applying any of it because you're just basking in like, whoa, that's a lot of great ideas. Really, that's the case with any singular idea as well. The lack of application is what kills it. You can be the best thinker in the world, but if nothing ever happens from it, where do we go? Right.
Big deal. Yep. That's why, hard work beats everything. The ability to apply something and go to work will trump any intellect or talent that exists. That's why we went out to...
Which is good news for you, Brian.
That I don't need intellect or talent or good looks.
You said it.
That's why, when we went out to Southern California, we went and checked out Leland, at the time, Leland's operation, which was Service Champions. And then we checked out Ishmael Valdez's operation.
Next Gen.
I want to say Service Avengers. That's his Facebook group, but Next Gen. And we took, it was going to be like me and then me and you. And I'm like, well, I'm not a recruiter. You're not a recruiter. I don't work in HR. You don't work in HR. So, we have me, the at that time operational sales manager, and then you at that time. What do you do for a living? Marketing or something?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
podcast.
Yeah.
And then we brought at that time our recruiter and our director of human resources, and Steph, who's actually the voice on the intro to the show. Shout out to Steph. And all of us had notepads, and we took down as many things as we possibly could. And then on the way back, talked about what things are immediately getting implemented. And that is what you have to do here. I know I talked to some people who have used my note to self notepad on the passenger seat thing that I did in a truck, where they'll hear something and they'll take a note. I don't remember who was it. Do you remember? I think I sent it to you. Dude said he'll just reach up onto his phone that's hanging from his dashboard and screenshot when he hears a great idea. He'll screenshot it, and then when he gets home, he goes through his pictures and he finds the screenshot, and he's like, "That's at 23 minutes and 16 seconds," and he listens again, and he's like, "Oh yeah," and he writes the idea
That's
down.
Clever. I like that.
Yeah, then he tries to take action on it.
Yeah,
brilliant.
It's safe to say that there's never been a screenshot of the Waste No Day podcast in the first 15 minutes.
I think he wasn't talking about Waste No Day.
Oh, okay.
He was just talking about Tommy Mello's podcast. It's like Gary V's podcast. Yeah, so strategies, idea. There has to be a strategy to take action on things like a podcast like this. Like, you have to have thought that through before you go into it. It may actually make sense to get ready to listen to something like this, especially an episode like this one, especially an episode like the next one.
Yeah. And you had brought up a concept a couple podcasts ago. I'm trying to think of it now, where when you hear that great idea, like immediately you need to take action on it. Like, this is what I'm going to do with that.
The 5-second rule.
That's what it was. Yeah.
You start counting down. I'm going to count down from 5, and I'm going to take an action on this idea. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And it maybe for me, most of the time, because I'm kind of lazy. I don't work that hard. I'm not very bright.
If you're looking for an argument.
Again, I'm not talented at anything. So for me, a lot of times it's just shooting an email or a text to somebody who is all of those things, which Nate tends to be most of those things.
My inbox is flush with Brian Burton emails.
Crazy, sporadic ideas that don't make a whole lot of sense in email form. But for me, it's like I get a good idea and I'm going to email someone I can delegate it to, or email someone who will put it on our IDS list for our EOS traction meetings every week. And then we can cover it as a group and decide if it's worth taking action on.
Right.
That's a good thing. Text it, email it, put it on a notepad, put yourself a reminder, but be ready to take action on an episode like this one, because Lawrence is bringing some heat.
I think one of the things that we can fall prey to is, when you're listening to something, you get into a passive mode. Like you just become a receiver. And to some degree, it can turn your mind off a little bit in terms of that action step, especially when you're listening to like a podcast, or I'll relate it to music, right? So imagine listening to a 3.5 minute song, and like every 15 seconds you stop it and say, well, that was an amazing guitar riff. Like, I wonder how they did that. I wonder how I could apply that same strategy to my guitar playing. Like, that's almost some of what you have to do. And like, it's okay to hit pause on a podcast and like think about what was just discussed. In fact, I'd probably recommend that as opposed to just blitzing through an hour's long worth of fire hose information and then trying to recollect what it all was about. Hit the pause button at 17 minutes 35 seconds and think about what just happened and how you can apply that into your life, your business, your truck, whatever it is, and make those things happen. That's where you're going to start seeing that incremental growth rather than trying to go through the whole thing and trying to remember what was there. I mean, Brian, you and I have spent many years going to the Global Leadership Summit, and we would hear top-notch speaker after top-notch speaker after top-notch speaker talk about incredible things, many of which were applicable to our lives, our business. And you get to the end of the day and you're just like, I'm drained. I got nothing. And then it just feels like a waste because you have all that information. But to be able to hit pause, like in a live seminar, to be able to hit pause and like literally break down that subject in your head like you can do on a podcast, I think there's a lot of value there.
Yeah, remember when Denzel was going to be there 2 years in a row and didn't show up both years?
We did get to see Chris Voss, though, which is cool.
That is how we came upon Chris Voss.
Yes, sir.
It was 7 years ago or 6 years ago. And then we decided to start the podcast, and it's one of the first names that popped up in my head, getting that dude on.
Made it happen. Episode 100.
For the record, Denzel never showed up 2 years in a row. So still salty with that guy. Great movie.
It's okay. Yeah, great movies is right. Well, this is going to be a great podcast and really excited for the opportunity to invite Lawrence on. But before that, we're going to turn to our review of the week.
Great show. 5 stars. Man, I have learned so much from this. Mike. Whew.
Oh, boy.
I don't see any way to get this right.
Let's go.
Mike P. What's up, Mike P?
PZ.
Mike P-O-N-K-F-N-E-N-F.
Is that real?
I think Mike misspelled it.
He misspelled his name.
In case he didn't. Dude, that's a sick last name, bro. That's nice. I like that. Don't you like that little chirp?
I do. I'll put that in my next rap.
Ponkinf.
Put that in Google and see how it spits it out.
You know what the problem is now? Anyone with a weird last name is like, I'm not writing those guys' names. They can make fun of my last name.
We like you, Mike. Next time you can just go by Mike Miller or something like that. But it's cool. We like you.
Mike P. And Nate's going to cut all this out so nobody will ever hear it. We appreciate the review, buddy. I'm glad you learned so much. This episode in particular, you're going to learn so much more. I assure you.
Absolutely. And with that, we're going to put none other than Lawrence Castillo in your passenger seat. Our guest today is Lawrence Castillo. He has 25 plus years in the industry and is widely considered one of the best operators in the country. He's been a former GM of Service Champions. He's been a former GM of the largest HVAC company in Canada. He's been a former GM of 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning in Los Angeles and is now currently residing as the president and operating partner of Brody-Pennell Heating and Air Conditioning based out of Los Angeles. Brody-Pennell is the largest HVAC company in LA and has been voted best heating and air conditioning company for readers of the LA Times in 2021 and 22. Congratulations, Lawrence. Brody-Pennell is also one of only 2 contractors in America that has won the Carrier President's Award every year in existence and is now in their 77th year of business. Welcome to the show, Lawrence.
Thanks for inviting me on, guys. Pleasure to be here. And I'm a fan. I think that the podcasts that I've heard you guys do with many people that I know, they've been great. And so I'm excited to chat with you guys this morning.
What was your favorite one?
I liked more recently, I liked one that you guys did with Ken, Goodrich, of course. And just to hear some of the, he shared a little bit on the show with you guys that I haven't heard him share before. So he's somebody I've known for 20 years as well. And, a lot of respect for him and for what he's done in the industry and for the industry.
Yeah, same here. He's done not just the industry, but me personally. So he's one of those guys that anytime he pops up on any of the trade podcasts, I'm like quick to download and listen.
Smart man and lots of lessons to be learned from him, and just an incredible success and what he's done with his companies over the years.
So speaking of incredible success, we were put onto you or each other by Dylan Moya, who's an incredible success himself and an incredible fan of yours. And he's, I think two separate conversations I've had with Dylan. He's brought you up and said, we got to make this happen because what a legend you are in the industry. So we're really excited to finally make it happen. You and I got to chat, which was as I was telling Nate a half hour ago, it was a fantastic conversation. I think we had like 30 minutes booked and ended up going an hour and 15 or something, which is always tells me it's going to be a good episode.
Well, I enjoyed it as well. And, always good to chat with people who have fought the same battles and, been in the same wars. So.
Well, Lawrence, we're so grateful that you've taken the time to spend with us today. And you're certainly a man that is also familiar with success. But for some of those who are listening to this, they may not be as familiar with you. We always like to have a little bit of an introduction from our podcast. So for the guests that we have on that day, and if you would be so kind as to give us the elevator speech of who Lawrence Castillo is.
Sure. I'm just a guy that runs air conditioning companies. I am the president and operating partner of Brody-Pennell Heating and Air Conditioning in Los Angeles. We are a 77-year-old company on the west side of LA, and we're just completing a couple of days away from completing the biggest year in our 77-year history.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. We, in the last calendar year, I've added between 30 and 40 bodies here. We've just changed a lot of process and really changed the face of the company. And so really proud of what my team has done here. But prior to that, I think that most of my career has been spent in airtime 500 companies, companies that, were Clockwork Home Services or airtime companies, and or lived by those, the playbook that we were given many years ago. I had a chance to run 3 companies for Leland Smith, Service Champions, and then the first 2 acquisitions that Service Champions made. And I also had the good fortune to be the GM of the largest heating and plumbing company in Canada, which is in Vancouver. And so, I've over the years I've been able to learn a lot of great stuff from a lot of smart people, and I'm here applying it in my own business every day, and I've just really been exposed to just some really brilliant stuff. So I'm fortunate. I have the equivalent of a Harvard education in HVAC, right? When you work for Jim Abrams and Leland Smith, it just doesn't get any better than that. And I'm very grateful to both of those gentlemen. The stuff that I learned from them, I use every day. And, Mr. Abrams' book, The Contractors' Guide to Success, sits in my desk drawer, and I still refer to it all these years later. And, Leland, I spoke to him last week, and I still chat with these guys. I spoke to Mr. Abrams a couple months ago, and, just very, very grateful. And I've had a good run. So
I love the attitude there, Lawrence, and certainly something that we appreciate as well. And that's kind of the focus of what today's episode is going to be on. You have the benefit of consolidating decades worth of education under some of the best, including your own experience, into our podcast today. And we're really hoping to get that Harvard level education in, the minutes that we have together. I'm curious though, how did you first get into the trades? Like what was your experience of getting into the industry in general?
It was really by accident. One of my good friends, our kids went to school together, and he had a little residential company in Simi Valley, California. And he was it was a little bit upside down, and we had chatted, and he knew that, I was a guy that knew how to run a business. And so he brought me in as his general manager on day one. And I had no heating and air conditioning experience. I knew nothing about it. And I walked in the door, and I just started with the books on the shelf, and the books on the shelf all said either Contractor Success Group or Clockwork Home Services. And, I went through all of that stuff and just sort of taught myself. And, back in those days, there was, teaching yourself was a little different. Today these kids, they go onto YouTube, and there are ways to learn today that there weren't many years ago. So I did what I had to do. I rode along with service technicians. I went out on installations. I unloaded the trucks for the warehouse. I booked calls. I, batched invoices. I did everything just to learn the business. And it wasn't, I realized quickly that this was something that I could be good at. And, in short order, inside of a couple of years, we were able to turn that company around and went ahead and sold it to a national consolidator. And after that, I ended up at 1 hour. So great first experience, and all that airtime experience and that first opportunity. Then I get to walk into 1 hour, and I already know the systems and the processes, and just a great experience to be able to work directly for Mr. Abrams, because I ran one of the corporate-owned centers. There were only a handful of corporate-owned centers at that time. Everything else was a franchise. And so that meant that I had plenty of time with him in person, on the phone. He was very interested in making our location a success. And, it was a very challenged location for many reasons. A lot of people sat behind the desk in that location to try to get it fixed. A great opportunity. I loved what I learned there. Made so many great friends. I think that from a peer group perspective, what airtime afforded us was to be able to meet other contractors, share ideas, and just establish friendships that I've carried with me for so many years. And so that was really critical, I think, to the next steps, for me. And then later in my career, of course, Service Champions. I owe Leland Smith a great debt of gratitude. I learned so much in that business, and, so much smart stuff that I hadn't seen before, stuff that I hadn't seen in the doors of those other locations. So, and all of that stuff is stuff that I keep with me today, and I use in my business today. The success of Leland Smith is not accidental, right? There's a reason that the Service Champions Group owns 25 businesses, and they're so successful, and that these companies are so profitable. So I've been fortunate, but like I said, so much of it just goes back to the processes and stuff that we learned from Mr. Abrams and Mr. Young many, many years ago. So, but I use it all today still, and it's worked for me.
Yeah, really cool tie-in for Brian and I specifically, because we're part of the 1 hour franchise that Jim Abrams would have started originally. And it's neat to have somebody from the heritage there on the podcast today. So Lawrence, one of the things about getting an education is they usually start with the basics, right? I mean, you learn arithmetic before you learn multiplication, before you learn the quadratic equation and everything else that goes on behind it.
Is that something you learned in the 11th grade? Because I only went through the 10th. What now?
Yeah, don't ask me to do it now. I can't. But Lawrence, when you think about, the basics in terms of low hanging fruit stuff, things that people often overlook, or they focus on it and then they get distracted from it for some other shiny object. When it comes to running an HVAC business or being a tech in the field, what are the basics that you think we should focus on?
I think if you're an operator or an owner, the basics are, to me, number one, be involved in your business in the day to day. I think that so many guys, they get to a point where they hit, a few million in revenue, whatever that is, whether that's, 3 or 4 million, whether that's 10 or 15, whether that's 35. And they're not involved, and they start to, enjoy life, which everybody has, everybody should when they, reach some modicum of success. But inevitably, if I stray too far away from this business and I start traveling all month, or I'm away and can't be reached, or I'm just, my employees are texting me, our results are going to suffer, right? And, it's the work ethic that you learn from whoever taught it to you, right? I still stand in front of my technicians and do meetings. I do performance reviews. I run this business, and I don't leave it to anybody else to run. Not that I'm, there aren't things that I don't delegate, but I know why I've had the success that I've had, and I take those things and I apply them today. So, I have lots of very successful friends who have sold their businesses and, who aren't as involved anymore, but, I'm in it knee deep every day. So that's the first thing for any owner or operator is you have to be there. Don't roll in at 10 o'clock and think that you're going to have the admiration or the respect of the people who drive a truck with your name on the side of it. That's number one. Number two, it's just to concentrate on the basics that you've learned that have, made a difference for you. I manage this business by the numbers. That's the way I learned to manage it. We distribute calls based upon performance. If you're not performing, you're getting spoken to. You might get written up. Everyone understands their place in the business and the expectations. We're always recruiting, and so the accountability piece is really big for me. So for contractors who are just letting guys drive around in a truck that isn't profitable, that's not a sustainable situation. And, that kind of madness has to stop. But if you're not in your business and you're not paying attention to these things, then, bad things will happen. We have call count meetings here. I'm recruiting like a madman all the time. I set up this business so that we create leads from service base. I'm trying to keep my marketing spend, down to 6 or 7%, which is where we've lived pretty much here. And that's because I create my own leads every day, right? My service department creates my sales leads daily. There are a lot of contractors out there that don't have a written plan. And, sometimes you have to reverse engineer your way to success, but the new year is starting, and it's a great opportunity for contractors who are not doing it to establish a budget and a manpower plan. That so that what it will take to achieve your budget next year, to establish a marketing plan so that you can get the call count that you need to hit that budget, to look at the calls that you're not booking. Everybody's throwing money at marketing and saying, I don't have enough calls. And half the time you do have the calls, you're just not booking them. The same goes with rehashing the leads that you're not selling. It's amazing how many contractors or, their salespeople are out there selling 35, 40%, but the other 60% of the leads that they're quoting, they just let them go, right? And your competitors are selling them. And if you had somebody in the seat who was working those leads, you're going to pick up, that's low hanging fruit right there. And not enough people are working on that. But the great and successful contractors do it. Service Champions does it. They have a whole room full of people that they're calling people the day that they quote and trying to get it closed on the back end, right? There are just so many things that, there's a whole laundry list of things that contractors can do to just, even without bringing in new customers. It's just the stuff that you have in your own service space, right? It's the jobs you quoted. It's the leads you're not booking. You have all this information. You have all these people that called you and wanted to do business with you and didn't for whatever reason. But you got to go back. You got to talk to these people again. And if you're doing that, there's the low hanging fruit. That's for a lot of companies, that's millions in revenue. And for smaller contractors, it's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, but it's there and it's in your service base. You just have to take the time to train somebody to sift through it, reconnect with people, and give them a reason to do business with you. So these are, some of the things that we do here on a daily basis. And, these are, These are things that there are so many lessons for small contractors who haven't had exposure to some of those, some of that great stuff. But that's some of the low hanging fruit that I think that people can, take a look at and to be able to change their business.
So Lawrence, great stuff there to start off with. And one of the things that, we focus on here is certainly coming at this from a technician's perspective. As you think about your experience with techs and dealing with them and growing the base and everything else that comes with it, what have been some of the key turning points in terms of either how you've trained technicians to approach the client, or maybe it's more that follow-up, hey, I met with you last week and this is me 3 days later giving you a ring to see, did you make a decision on that? What have been some of the things that you have seen over the years really take hold and make a difference in your business from a technician's perspective?
Great question. Seen lots of selling techs over the years and really haven't seen a lot of guys that are great at follow-up, right? And I'm talking about many, many years and many, many successful technicians. And universally, they're just not great at follow-up. They're ready for today's 2 or 3 calls or whatever you're going to give them. And, they're not concentrating so much on what they quoted yesterday and didn't sell, right? And, that's just a mindset shift that has to happen there, because they've got, if you're selling $2 or $3 million a month, that means that you have $3-4 million in quoted work that you didn't sell. And just working your book is just so critical. Many of them don't do that. But I think that, and that's why companies have rehash departments. They have rooms full of people, smart companies. They have people that will sit there and start to contact these customers immediately. And, I think that's the fail safe. I just don't know that you can, not that you don't trust your field personnel, but these are, if you're the owner or operator listening to this, these are your leads. You've paid for these leads, right? These are your customers or potential customers. You have to do everything that you can to close those deals. You can't leave it in the hands of your comfort advisors. You can't leave it in the hands of your selling technicians. You have to step in and get somebody else involved. And oftentimes just having a different voice on the phone with a different offer is going to do it. But guys, universally for a selling technician, to answer the original question, some people are very organized, right? And they keep a very detailed ledger of the calls that they run, and they will, do a handwritten note thanking them for the opportunity, and they will schedule alarms on their phone to call back and to, take another whack at it. But, many of them they're not good at that. And just look at the cab of their truck, right? That's going to tell you everything about their life. They're either organized or they're not.
Yeah, right.
And so, I don't know that you can do your best, schedule one call in the morning, one day a week where everybody comes into the meeting room and they're working on talking to people, right? But it takes that kind of intervention sometimes, right? You have to make them do it because they're not going to want to do it. So the accountability piece, once again, I don't know that I have a great answer for how to make them do it. But as the owner or operator, you have to figure it out and make sure that somebody's, going back behind these quoted leads. So for what it's worth, that's probably the best answer I have for you.
Right. And I so appreciate that. For the guys that you have seen, maybe they're more naturally bent towards it, or maybe they've just disciplined themselves into doing it. Can you speak to what that practically looks like? Or are they doing those phone calls between calls? Are they taking time in their evening to make those phone calls? Do they, does dispatch give them a long lunch break to do follow-up? Or what does that practically look like where everybody's winning?
For me, it's a revisit. It's you either have a sales lead coordinator who works closely with that selling technician, and he's talking to that person and saying, okay, I just went out to Mr. and Mrs. Jones's house. Here's the situation. They're out of town for a week. They want to do it, blah, blah, blah. I need to get back in that house. I need you to call them on this day, get me back there in the evening. So I got 2 legs and, blah, blah, blah. the revisit, I think, is the best way. And that's why you have a sales lead coordinator, right? They're going to, at least in my business, they're going to be the ones to help bridge the gap. And, they're the ones that book the lead in the first place, right? There's already a great rapport and a great relationship from, between the person that booked the call and the customer. And, they can get you back in the house. And if you can get back in the house, and take if they're willing to have you back in the house, they're interested in buying, right? They're not going to have you back out there if they're not buyers. So I think that, the revisit, is the best way to do that. And as opposed to phone calls, I think that, a lot of guys will do a lot of emailing, right? And I guess the positive on the emails is that everybody looks at their email, right? A lot of, if you go out,
not our technicians.
I just don't look at your emails, Nate. Look, those emails. Look, they're so long. He never hits that return button. There's no break. There's no separation in paragraphs. I try to tell him all the time. We're techs, man.
Okay,
we're not professional readers.
Continue on, Lawrence. Emails. Everybody but us looks at their emails, or but mine. It's fine.
Got it. Yeah, they've got you blocked. It goes into the junk, right?
Exactly.
I think that back before there was the ability to email your customer, you were relying upon the phone call. And it's so easy for the customer to not answer the phone, right? They can just see, it's that guy from 1 hour calling. Let's just, we're not going to do anything there. Let's not answer that. Let it go to voicemail. So you didn't really have the opportunity to get your point across. But with a good email, you're able to get back in front of them and state your case, right? If used properly, it can be very effective. But, that's, once again, this comes to organization and discipline, right? And the guys who are selling $5 and $6 and $7 million, they're better with that than the guys that are selling $1.5 million and $2 million, right? They're leaving it all on the table. They're not following up. And if they would follow up and if they would capture some of those on the second chance around, they'd be selling $3 million or $4 million.
So, Lawrence, I mean, there's a dozen different ways of doing sales in the field from a technician's or a comfort advisor's or a selling tech's perspective. We just had a really interesting podcast the other week regarding doing a buddy system, which was a pretty cool innovation. I know there's companies that run sole comfort advisors. There's companies that have selling techs and everything in between. What is the Lawrence Castillo preferred way of doing sales, and why do you like it?
Another great question. So, it used to be there were only two ways to sell, right? You either ran the selling technician model or you ran comfort advisors or some mixture of them. But there's a third way today, and that is exactly what you guys just alluded to. The third choice is to either have a channel manager or a supervisor and to be selling that way. So there are now three ways to sell a job. And the episode that you alluded to with Daniel Arroyas with the buddy checks, I managed Daniel at Service Champions, and he is just outstanding on those calls. And, we had a system where he, acted as the supervisor or channel manager, and he has a little team of technicians, 3 or 4, and those guys, they're working for him. And, they're running their first call, and on their first call, Daniel is talking to Johnny Technician, and 30 minutes into the call, and Johnny Technician is saying, "Hey Daniel, there's nothing here. This thing said it was a 2002. It's actually a 2020. I'm going to finish up here and I'll talk to you on my next call." And then he talks to his next guy. "Hey, I've been here for 40 minutes. I've got it all torn apart. It's a Ream Criterion. I got both legs here. They like me. They gave me coffee, blah, blah, blah." And Daniel is on his way to that call, right? But he's got to keep track of all these guys. And, there's an art to building a schedule that makes sense so that you don't have 3 guys that need you at the same time. So there's a dispatch, they have to know how to prioritize these calls and to build the schedule so that it works. But that is a really effective way of doing this. Let me tell you, Daniel Arroyas and Brent Buckley, they're not running marketed leads, right? These guys are putting up the numbers that they put up because they're in a system that is set up for success. And, both of those guys they're King Kong at what they do, but the system is in place. But that, the buddy check system, it's just a great way of running calls. There's strength in numbers. And when you have two people at the house telling you the same thing, and, they're putting on a great customer service show, they're educating the customer. When all of this is going on, you've got the momentum, right? And you're able to put the customer on the market and take them off the market on the same day. And people feel good about the decision. And additionally, you're getting your price because they weren't planning on spending $20,000 today, right? But, for folks who are interviewing contractors and collecting bids, that's a race to the bottom, right? Like, they've got a stack of bids, and the expectation is that you're going to come in, and to win the job, you're going to have to be lower. And if you're selling off of a tune-up or a repair call like you do in the buddy check system, there's, the customer is not expecting to buy a system today. And so that's the beauty of a technician turned lead, is that, your margins on those calls are traditionally much larger, because you're not, one of 7 bids. So I love that system. Here at my company, I have a mixture, and, I have a few guys that have been here for a very long time who, run marketed leads, and I have, selling technicians. I've got the whole thing here, but it's a matter of making sure that the right personality is in the right uniform. I have a guy here who's a selling technician, but I tried to make him a comfort advisor and just didn't work. And, you put him back in the uniform and everything, he kills it. So, it's just making sure that everybody's in the right, in the right position. But I don't have I've been at places that just sold all with comfort advisors. At Service Champions, we had both. We had a couple of comfort advisors, but we sold mostly by selling technician. So it's what suits your business. It's what suits your clientele. But certainly if you have a comfort advisor who can wear a service uniform, that's the best of both worlds, right? And who understands service, like a Daniel Arroyas, because he was a selling technician forever. He now operates, he doesn't have tools in his truck anymore. Or he probably does, but he's not using them, right? He's letting the junior technicians do all that heavy lifting, and he can come in and, he can get the deal closed. So it's different for every company. I've seen it done successfully a number of different ways, but it's just what suits, your personalities and the people that you have.
What about, so maybe for some smaller companies or companies that haven't yet employed that hybrid model, who are still operating with, a true tech flip, that type of scenario. What have been some of the training points that you focused on in developing the conversation, right? So right now, in our neck of the woods, we just actually half the country went through like a massive cold sweep, right? I mean, record low temps and everything. Right. And I was just talking with our install manager the other day saying coldness makes us weak, right? Because when it gets cold like this, everything becomes easy. There's incredible pain. There's incredible urgency. The unit's broken. It's not working today. I need heat. Get it fixed. I don't care the price. Put it in. Right. But that same flux of leads and weather and all that coming in makes us weak because we get complacent in our process, and we start taking things out and stripping it down because it just became so easy to do so. So now that, the weather comes back up and we start getting those price objections again, or those, I don't think maybe next year objections and all that. What have been the things that you've focused your flip techs on in terms of helping them communicate the value of replacing the system, or helping them understand the urgency of why they should do it now instead of later. Basically, how have you trained your guys to get a flip to the Comfort Advisor in that model?
I think for me, this is all surrounding customer service. My company, we are a customer service company that happens to service and install air conditioners. And I let my guys know that I am just as happy when they go into a call and they get a 5-star review, or if they go into a call and sell a service agreement, as I am when they when they set up a turnover. I love the revenue. I love when they turn a call over and we go out and sell it for $30,000. That's great. But, I want them to be equally rewarded and equally propped up for getting 5-star reviews and for selling service agreements and creating future work for everybody else, on our service team. So I don't apply a ton of pressure. They know they have KPIs and metrics that they have to hit, but I want them to just give great customer service, because if they give great customer service and our online reputation is stellar and we have all these 5-star reviews, then people are going to read those reviews and they're going to say, I can't wait to have these guys come out. When we come out and we're delivering just an amazing customer service experience, they're just shaking their head and they're saying, this is exactly what everybody said online. And they're feeling it. And if they're feeling it, what you want to happen in the house is going to happen in the house. So for me, it's not communicating anything necessarily, but just to give a great customer service experience. And that includes, if you're Johnny Junior technician, it's the education, right? We get the customers involved. We touch them every 10, right? Hey, I'm going to be out here at the condenser. Just wanted you to see what I'm looking at and what I'm going to be working on today. And you're showing them the before, right? With all the leaves inside of the condenser. And, and then when you get them in 10 minutes, when you've got the lid off, when you've cleaned all the stuff out, once you've sprayed the condenser coil, once you've, rinsed everything off, once you waxed the compressor and you bring it back out, they can't believe what they're seeing. They can't believe that they're paying $95 for this and nobody's ever done this for them before. And how did you restore it back to factory fresh condition? And this kit is dynamite, right? Let me go work on the indoor unit. And it's just all of this momentum, right? They just love this kid and they're bringing you a sandwich and, they can't believe what's happening before their eyes. So, and as the education continues and you say, hey, just wanted to make you aware of a couple of things. Took a look at your duct system and, you've got old gray flex ducts. And let me tell you about that kind of duct. And let me show you your connections and all the dirt on the cut 9 insulation and how all those negative leaks are throwing dust into your airstream and blah, 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 blah. The education, their eyes are wide open. They're buying it, right? They're understanding that you're the professional and you're explaining to them all the things that they were afraid they might hear, but they like who's telling them all of this stuff. And when it comes time to say, hey, let's have somebody come out, give you your options. I see a ton of potential repairs. I don't want you to make that decision without seeing the rest of we're the kind of company that wants to give everybody all of their options so you can make an informed decision. So for me, it's about customer service. It's about education. And if you follow that pattern and follow that recipe, the turnovers will come. The 5-star reviews will come. The service agreements will come. But I teach customer service here. And, our online reputation reflects it. People love us. And the readers of the Los Angeles Times have voted us the best heating and air conditioning company in Los Angeles for the last 3 years running. And we're not a small city, right? A lot of people live here and they can vote for anybody, but they vote for my company.
That's fantastic.
Because, thanks. But we work hard on teaching them, give people a great experience.
Absolutely.
And if you do that, the rest will come.
And that is something that I'm sure that you have learned over the years, specifically in your tenure with Abrams and with Leland. That's something I kind of want to focus on here as we move into more of the graduate level classes of the education. you've been in the industry for decades. You've worked under some of the best, and you're probably making a name for yourself in that category as well right now. And over that time, you've seen the industry, not just HVAC, but the home services industry as a whole evolve, right? It used to be this chuck in a truck mentality with a beat down pickup and a magnet on the side, maybe show up in a ratty t-shirt and some tools and grease on your face and go down to the basement and do your thing. And then Abrams steps in and he flips it all on its head and turns this thing into almost a white collar service industry where you're literally wearing a white collar. You have shoe covers and on-time appointments and uniforms and branded trucks and all this stuff. And then you have Leland stepping in and just putting incredible systems and processes in to back that all up. Where do you see the industry evolving to next? Like, what is the next level of all this going to take us to, and what's that look like?
Great question. I don't think that good old-fashioned customer service will ever not have a place in our industry. And yes, Mr. Abrams did teach us, you knock twice and you back up 2 steps, and friends knock and strangers ring the bell, and there was just so much smart stuff that really just and it existed out there, right? Ron Smith is another brilliant man that so many people owe a debt of gratitude to, because he helped with all of this as well, right? There's just so many smart people that came before us that gave us the opportunities that we have. But I think that the customer service piece, I think that becomes even more important, because 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, whatever, there was no Yelp, right? There were no Google ratings. The world has changed. Everything we do is based upon how many stars you have. It doesn't matter if you're ordering a pizza or if you're ordering something off of Amazon and you want to read the reviews. It's all about the reviews. And if contractors are grasping that and really making an effort to capture those reviews, I'll tell you what, that is the thing in this business that I like. On our group chat, I just make sure to acknowledge the reviews, right? Yes, they it says, hey, Johnny went out there and sold a system for $30,000. That's great, but I'll take 5 reviews as equally as much as I'll take that 30,000 in revenue. So I think that going forward, the reviews just continue to be really critical. And my phone rings, our phones ring here because of that. So that's one thing. I think that we're seeing 2023 is going to be a big year of change, from a regulatory standpoint. And, I've had this discussion with my salespeople over the last couple of weeks, but, the world is going to it. There's an electrification happening, right? It's going to be heat pumps. And here in California, the price per therm of gas, natural gas, in 6 or 7 years is going to be 7 times what it is now. Which means that if I sell somebody a system, right, a gas furnace today, or a complete system, a gas electric system, 7 years from now, they're potentially going to be very upset because they now have this 7-year-old furnace that it's just a fortune to heat their house. So we have to really start to talk to people about what's happening in the world and why you have to consider going to a heat pump right now, because you don't want to be regretful about the decision 6 or 7 years from now. You may have an additional electrical expense right now to convert to a heat pump system, but if you're doing the right thing for your customers, you're having those discussions now. There's a massive tax credit coming from the government, in 2023 for this conversion. And certainly here in California, there's like 3 or 4 additional rebates. We're talking, this is real money, these rebates. And so I've been talking to them about that, but I think that's a change that we're going to be seeing, and we have to be prepared, and we have to be talking to people about this now. So I'm making sure that, as we're selling systems, I'm talking to all my salespeople saying, are you explaining this to people? Right? Because we just need to be prepared to do a lot of heat pump conversions over the next, number of years. I think that, and your question was, what are the changes are we going to see? But I think we talked about the different ways of selling here, comfort advisor or selling technician, or, the whole buddy check system. I think that will continue to evolve. I think, the days of running a comfort advisor out to 3 calls and, I think back to the persuasion system. I don't know if you guys were around in Clockwork at all when we had that, but the comfort advisor used to carry a little yellow suitcase, and it was called the persuasion system. And and the world has changed since then, but that persuasion system had little cards in it that you would lay on the table, and there was the comfort survey was in there, and your load calculation was in there, and you had just tons of stuff in there. And that's one thing that we sort of left behind, right? Mr. Abrams gave us a bunch of great tools, but I think the world has changed a little bit, and I think you're going to see less comfort advisors and more people in a service uniform selling. But certainly selling that way, with that little suitcase, I think that's gone by the wayside in a lot of places. It's an easy business decision, right? If you're able to close turnovers at 60 or 70 or 80%, and you're closing marketed leads with a comfort advisor at 30, 40, 45, 50%. I mean, it's just all it is math. So I think you'll see less people selling in a polo shirt and more people selling in a service uniform. But I think those are a few differences that we'll see over the next few years. I think these are important items for contractors to be thinking about, especially the electrification stuff.
I agree with you. And I think to some degree, buyers are smarter today. It's very defensive when somebody with a suit and tie, so to speak, walks up to the door. I think people are looking for more of that organic experience. And that's why the selling tech model, the hybrid model, that is, I think, really taking off and going to have legs for a long time here.
Agreed.
So Lawrence, as we kind of turn into more of the structure behind things, idea here with systems and processes to support the customer service that we do in the field. Customer service is only as good as the machine that backs it up, right? I mean, you can only, a person's word only goes so far until what they've promised or that what they've committed to follow through on doesn't actually happen. So you've spent time in small organizations. You've certainly spent time in incredibly large organizations that have required substantial amounts of structure and systems in place to make things happen. If I'm, sitting at the beginning of the new year here and considering my ways and I want to expand my business and things like that, what would be some of the systems that you would instruct me to make sure that I have really dialed in? Because it's so easy to get a mile wide and an inch deep on stuff, and you don't realize, like, you feel like you're covering all this ground, but you don't really have things where they need to be. So if we were to focus in on a couple key structures or processes or systems that we would design or shore up to make sure that they are rock solid, what would be the things that you would tell me as either a business owner or a GM or maybe even a field supervisor or service manager to really make sure that we have focus on that they're dialed in so that our customer service does what we intend it to do?
I love that, a mile wide and an inch deep. I think this all goes back to, for me, structure and discipline and accountability. And I can certainly tell you that the years that I spent in the doors of Service Champions taught me so much about that. Leland Smith was an accountant, and that business was run by the numbers. And, he made a decision early on in that business that we were going to be different. And, and it's funny because I was running 1 hour of Los Angeles, and I'd talk to Mr. Abrams, many times weekly, and he'd say, well, what is Leland doing? Because Leland was an airtime company, so he could see, how well they were doing, but he really wanted to, because he wanted us to be a success as well. We also had an agreement where Mr. Abrams said, don't ever steal people from Leland, right? So I tried not to recruit his people away because I'm a very predatory recruiter. But I think that the stuff that I learned from Leland was about the structure and the discipline. Everything in that building was written down and signed. There was an understanding, and it didn't matter. Position agreements for the technicians. Here's what we expect of you. If you don't hit those numbers, there are consequences. Sign here, right? And it didn't matter, what it was. Clean truck, sign here. Arrival time, sign here. Have you done your door hangers? Sign here. Your club ratio, how many service agreements you're selling, out of how many calls you go to, sign here. The amount of time that you spend on a call, the way that your uniform looks, all of that stuff. It was all in writing. There was an understanding. And if you weren't going to do your job, we were going to provide the training so that you could have the opportunity to do better. But, sometimes it just didn't work out. And we were always recruiting. And we had people, we had a recruiting class of however many, I think today's recruiting classes over there are probably, 40, 50 technicians. And they do that in, maybe a dozen weeks. But if you weren't doing your job, guess what? Like, look over your shoulder. And, I think that I run this business much the same way. I'm big on accountability. All of us have a job to do. And if we're not hitting the expectations that we were hired to hit, then, there were going to be consequences. Many years ago, at the first company that I worked for, I hired Charlie Greer to come out and to ride along with my technicians. And, I remember the first day that he stood in front of everybody in the classroom, he told them that their job is to make money for the company, right? Their job isn't to make friends or to, do anything other than to make money for the company. And I think that everyone needs to be reminded of that constantly. I have a lot of young technicians here. I have a whole recruiting system here, and I've got a lot of young guys, and I let them know we put the numbers in front of everybody, and there's no hiding, right? And that was something Terry Nicholson used to talk about is, there's no hiding from the numbers. And, we put them up and they are what they are. And if you want to be as successful as the guy sitting next to you, you have the power and the opportunity to do that every day. So I think for me, it's the accountability piece. It doesn't matter if you're a call center representative. There's a certain amount of your call booking percentage should be, a certain percentage. You need to be on time to your job every day. It's the expectation. And if you don't have that in place, what you can expect is just a bunch of people going different directions and uneven performance. And you're looking at your manager saying, what's wrong with our business? Well, what's wrong with your business is that you're not managing your people and they don't have a clear level of expectation. And, that's where it begins. This is what I expect of you. If you're not hitting it, come on in my office and we can talk about why you're not hitting it. If we need to provide you additional training or tools to be able to do that, then we can do that. And to have a system that helps, these young people, to get to where you want them to be. But, sometimes you just discover that it's not a good fit. We hire a lot of people here and not everybody makes it, right? I mean, all you can do is give them the opportunity. So the accountability and the structure, written processes, everything signed, manuals. If you're not doing that stuff, it's just, you're setting yourself up for disappointment later on. So Mr. Abrams taught us all of that stuff. He gave us books full of manuals. He gave us P&Ls. He just showed us what, everything should look like in a business that's going to do 20% net profit. So, if you don't have access to those books, then maybe you need to look at being in a best practices group, right? Or having a network of friends that have been in those kinds of groups that know, what you should be doing, to reach that level of success. So to me, guys, it's always about discipline and process and procedure.
So Lawrence, you've worked in small and large businesses. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
All right. And if you could, I mean, kind of group them in, I don't know what's fair, but maybe like a 5 million and under business, and then maybe like a 5 to 50, and then a 50 plus. If you look at those and maybe those three categories, and you can say, all right, I'm the hiring manager, I'm the owner of these, and I want to make one key hire positionally, right? And either I need to go out and I need to get that person, or I need to spend my time investing in that person, because I believe this person for this size business is going to have the deepest impact on whatever it is that I care about. And I know that's a broad question, but you get where I'm coming from. If you look
I have
at that,
an easy answer.
okay, let's hear it. Go ahead.
A recruiter.
All right.
Recruiter. You're not going to be able to fill any positions in your business unless you have somebody inside the building working 40 hours a week on bringing talent into the door for you to talk to. And this was something that I learned from Leland. We hired 2 people once upon a time for that duty. And we had 2 people working on that. And it takes the effort of those folks to establish relationships with trade schools and to spend their time just reaching out and contacting people that might make sense for your business. Doesn't matter if they're an analyst, it doesn't matter if they're a controller, it doesn't matter if they're a call center representative. You have to have somebody working on that. And because a recruiting plan isn't opening up your doors and saying, hey, we did 5 million this year, we want to do 8 million next year. How are you going to get there? Right? Unless you're buying another business, or unless you're $1 million salespeople, double overnight, you have to bring in bodies. And so a great recruiting plan, as a part of your budgeting, you have to have a manpower plan. There's just no way to grow your business without having a great system. Back in 2012, I think, we built a technician academy at Service Champions. We wrote a training curriculum.
I've seen that. It's amazing. Brian and I have both been there and visited.
It was something that, because and it was that year, it was 2012, I believe. We just realized, listen, we have to have a really concerted effort if we're going to grow this business the way we want to grow it. I think we were at, 17 million, something like that at that time. And so in order to bring the volume of people in that we needed to hit our budget and our goals, we hired 2 people to recruit. We built a training academy. We wrote a curriculum. I had one service manager who just literally sat at the computer and just wrote. A very smart guy, and gave a great head start to that program. But you have to have a program. And, I have a program here, and we do it in, 10 weeks or so. And, I think that that's for any size business. Doesn't matter. If you're $5 million, hire somebody to recruit. Because, you also have people that you've identified in the business that are in your bottom 10% and that you want to replace, but you are at their mercy. You can't replace that person in the call center who has such a low booking percentage, and that it's never going to change. And the only way to move them along is to have somebody to put in their place, because if you just let them go, guess what? You're going to be answering the phone. So it just takes a really dedicated recruiting effort. And for companies who are serious about growth, you have to hire somebody inside. The smart companies have that. And I've got 2 of them. And, that's the reason that we were able to add 40 bodies last year, is because I'm constantly interviewing people, constantly. And I'm very selective. So a lot of folks, they're just not going to make it here. But if I'm not seeing somewhere between, 7, 8, 9 people every week, then it's a failure. And I'm talking to my recruiters about why we're not seeing the volume of people that we need to see.
How many?
I want 8 players.
How many people do you have currently?
We're bumping up against 100.
Okay. And you said you're out of LA.
We are.
Nice. So how many recruiters do you have?
I have 2.
2 recruiters. And Do you have goals of what you're trying to get to and when in terms of people, or do you go by revenue or?
No, it's by, if you get the people, the revenue, it's just all it is math, right? And so, for the amount of people, you establish your budget and you say, hey, we're going to do whatever, 25 million this year. Then it's call count, it's revenue per lead, it's service invoices, it's just one big math. That meme of that guy who's got all that stuff on that whiteboard and all the strings and
yes,
that's what it is, right? It's that. And, but if you establish budget, have a
This is why I'm glad we don't have a video, because I shook my head no, and Nate is now scouring the internet to find it for me.
And I don't know the guy. I don't know. He was on some show. He's a little guy with a beard, and it's a well-known thing. It's it's the whole crime board, right? Where you got the strings, the red string.
You're talking about Charlie from Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yes,
that's the guy.
Carol.
That's the guy, right?
Yeah.
That's the guy. And I've got that board in my office.
All right, we're going to post that in the Facebook group when this episode rolls.
There we go. People who are serious about growth, they have that board in their office, right? I got whiteboards all over this room or this building. And there's a purpose to that, right? And I leave stuff on those whiteboards and because I want it to be seen. So yeah, you'll catch me creeping around this building and writing stuff on those whiteboards that I need them to see and keep in mind. But so I think, and your original question was, what's the one position? It's a recruiter or two, but there are a lot of guys that have figured that out that are really smart, big operators. They do that. They have that process down. They have their own school. But for the smaller guys, you just have to weigh it out, right? You're going to end up paying somebody, whatever it is, $30 an hour, $25 an hour. I don't know, whatever the kind of candidate that you find, but they have to be able to source talent for you because, and I can tell you this, when I started doing this, and as this, started to grow and my plate started to become more full, I believe that, I could do everything better than anybody else in my building, right? Let me do the recruiting. Let me do the marketing. I'll handle all of it. I guarantee you, I didn't spend the time on recruiting that I ever needed to. I didn't understand it at that point in my career. It always got pushed it was under a stack on my desk. And, now all these years later, I understand it and I understand that's the way to grow, right? I wish I would have figured that out, 20 years ago, but my younger self, listening to my older self, is that the recruiting piece, don't do it yourself. You're not going to have the time. You're not going to devote the effort to it that another body will if it's their entire job.
So you would say that same answer regardless of company size?
Well, I've also been a $1.5 million company, right? When I walked into the door of that place many years ago.
And in that case, you
become the
recruiter.
Yeah, you become the recruiter, or you've got a CSR, you've got somebody who's doing your bookkeeping. Then maybe you go on to Upwork, right? And you find somebody to do it virtually for you, or maybe your wife is at home doing it, or your daughter or somebody. You just have to have people making contact with other people. So, if you're a really small contractor looking to grow, you have to be talking to people, right? Because guaranteed you have somebody either driving a truck for you or answering phones for you or installing equipment for you that probably shouldn't be working for you, right? And that's a really tough position to be in, and you can't let them go because you don't have someone to replace them with. So the quickest way to have a bunch of A players is just have someone reaching out and recruiting.
Yeah, that's something that I think everybody in the industry continues to struggle with, and why so many guys have turned to doing internal training, apprenticeships, schooling, whatever it is, or getting them straight out of school. What have been some of your most effective places to recruit?
Certainly the trade schools have been a great friend to us here at Brody. And, even at places like Service Champions, right? But we're at Service Champions, it was a little different when we started doing that many years ago. We would put up an ad and we would say, hey, we're interviewing for all positions. And the job market in Orange County was such that a lot of people were looking. And we would have a line out the door of maybe like 50 or 60 people. We'd bring them all into the meeting room. Us managers would sit in the back of the room, and every one of them had the opportunity to stand up at the front of the room, at the podium, speak for 3 minutes about themselves, where they're working now, what position they're applying for, why are they here, what's wrong with their current job. And after listening to 50 of them, us managers would say, okay, we want number 1, number 4, number 17, and number 26. Dismiss the rest. And we would re-interview those 4. We'd bring them back a couple of days later and interview them again. And, we went through this whole process, and that's how we identified people, right? Today, in today's world, it's a little more specialized, I think. But that was an effective way. And for companies that don't even have that in place, just do it. Just open up your doors and post a great picture in your ad of your building or some of your people working and your newly wrapped truck, and tell them, hey, we're hiring for all positions. And you'd be surprised. You'll find a diamond. We were recruiting for personality for the field. Nothing, not for skill, right? We had people coming in that had 20 years of experience with another company, and we just weren't interested in that, right? We didn't want somebody with bad habits, somebody who'd worked for another company and didn't want to do it our way because the way that they know is better. We weren't looking for that. So yeah, it's great to find fresh new talent, recruit for personality, and we can train them how to turn a wrench, but just looking for those people who will make your customers happy. Like I spoke about earlier, it's all about customer service. If your customers are happy, they're going to write those reviews and your phone will ring.
So you've seen, aside from amazing operators and being mentored by some of the best operators in the history of the industry, you've also seen some of the best technicians in industry and probably in the history of the industry, and had a lot to do with their training and development. But something I know from doing a lot of that myself the last 9 years is just getting to watch them is like, apart from training them, just seeing them develop and how they develop themselves and the things that they do separately outside of the company and their mentors that make them grow exponentially. I talk about the stuff that I see often, but I thought it'd be really cool to get some perspective from somebody else who's done the same thing for quite a bit longer than I have. What are some things, like the biggest things that you see that separate guys like Daniel Arroyas from the people who either come in and never really develop into the potential that they have, or they just come in, fizzle out fast, and go back to one of the crummier places to work where you just punch a time card and never really develop?
Great question. I think, it all goes down to the work ethic. Daniel Arroyas is a really special talent. At that time at Service Champions, it was an embarrassment of riches. The sales team, just up and down. I don't know that you could ever duplicate something like that. And I know everybody's got big successful companies, but what was going on in that room was incredible. Daniel Arroyas, his work ethic, incredible. He's going to spend 3 hours, right? He's going to spend 3 hours, and he's going to leave with the sale, and he's going to educate people, and he's going to let them understand why we're the company that people should be doing business with. He's going to do all right. And I remember times when he sold at one house, and then he walked across the street and sold them, and he walked down the street and sold them. This happened. This is real life stuff. And
wow. That's one of those stories. If I was on a show being interviewed like he was a few weeks ago here, I probably would have told that story,
he would never tell it. And I remember the stuff that this guy, just at the end of the day, and I'm speaking literally. At the end of the day, I would check and see who was still on calls, right? And I could just tell by the time being spent what we were going to sell, And with Arroyas, you see that he's 2 hours in, 2.5 hours in. When that guy gets 2.5 hours into a call, there's no way he's walking out of there without the money. There's no way. So, his work ethic, he would tear the system apart into a million pieces and show them exactly why it makes sense to have a system that can make you comfortable, that can, save you money on your utility expense, that can give you a better quality of air. He was expert in that. A very direct and a very authoritative communicator. And that really worked for him. I had the good fortune of, at that same company, coaching a comfort advisor who was so many years in a row #1 on the airtime board nationwide. His name is Jim Dotson. And, this guy is the model, right? He is exactly what you want. And the same thing, he's going to go into a call and spend time. That was the common denominator. We spent time. That team, they worked late. They understood what was it. And when I say late, these people were walking out of calls at 9 and 10 and 10:30 p.m. Whatever it took. They knew that they had to spend time. And they understood that. So it was the work ethic, of those great folks. I have a selling technician that works for me now that he started working for me probably 15 years ago. And he is a 1 hour guy also. And he understands all of that smart stuff. And, because of that, he carries that in his back pocket. And he understands what the comfort survey is, right? And he understands getting the objections out early, right? And he's not afraid to, the customer they're nervous when you show up. And he understands that he has to get some of that uncomfortable stuff out of the way early and, talk about them making a decision today, and if we have everybody who's a decision maker in the house, present, and, it's very uncomfortable to talk about price. It's not what the customer wants to deal with, but let's start to talk about, like the comfort survey asked, the ranges, right? The price ranges. This Jim Abrams, John Young stuff from 25 years ago is it's so applicable today. It works. Many use it. And I think universally, all the great salespeople and selling technicians that have worked for me, they've just been great at creating urgency. My entire career, except for 3 years in British Columbia, my entire career has been spent in Southern California. And in Southern California, we have no weather to speak of, right? It is, it's always in the 70s and overnight temperatures are in the 50s. And yeah, we get a little bit of rain here and there, and we might have a few nights that, dip lower than that. And here in the city in Los Angeles, it doesn't get to 100, right? In the valleys it does, but in the city, you're in the high 80s and maybe the low 90s on the very hottest days. So our salespeople, our comfort advisors, our service technicians in this city have to work hard. And I remind them of this constantly. When the weather is mild, we have to work harder. We can't skip the steps. We don't have weather at our back. It's not, it's just, we have to educate people. We have to create our own urgency. I talk to them about the home shopping network all the time, right? The home shopping network is easily the greatest example of creating urgency. You turn on the TV and, you've got the lady and she's showing you the pots and pans, and she's, there's a little grid on the side of the screen that says there are 47 copper sets left and there are 172 steel sets left. And, So those are being updated. And there's a countdown clock at the bottom right. And, you're running out of time to make the deal. And on the bottom of the screen, it says you can make 3 easy payments of $69.95. And let me talk to Jane. Jane's calling in from Raleigh, North Carolina. Jane, talk to us about these pots. Oh, I bought 3 sets for everybody for Christmas. And it's madness what's going on, right? They're coming at you from all directions. And, the housewives are sitting there with the credit card and their head is spinning and they're dialing in and, they're just ordering and it's creating urgency where it doesn't exist, right? This is a warehouse full of boxes of pots. But in the right hands, amazing urgency can be created and amazing results can happen. And the great ones, they know how to create urgency. And here in Los Angeles, we have to do it every day because we do not have weather. We don't have 110 degrees. We don't have...
Yeah, 10 months of shoulder season, 8 months of shoulder season.
Yeah.
Spring,
exactly.
Spring and summer.
It's so funny. My family's in Denver, right? I'm from Colorado. And on the little family group chat over the last week, all of these pictures of the snow and, -4 and -15 and all of this stuff. And last Sunday it was 80 or 83 or something like that here. So I would love, God, just to have some snow on the ground. I can't imagine what that's like. But we don't have it here, right? Furnaces aren't breaking. I don't walk in and we have, 26 no heat calls on the board. It doesn't happen. We are selling service agreements. We are running maintenance calls, and we are creating urgency by giving a great customer service experience. That's what we have to do here. And as a result, I think we have a lot of Southern California is populated by some of the best selling technicians and salespeople just because, we've been forced to have to make it happen for ourselves. We don't, we're not rolling up to calls and there's a popped capacitor on every call. This doesn't work like that here.
Sound advice there, Lawrence, and so appreciate you bringing in those analogies with the shopping network. I think that's really appropriate for what we're trying to do here and creating urgency. As we bring things in for a landing here, I'm sure some people are interested in learning more about you, Lawrence, or how to get in touch with you. What's a good place for them to find you or to reach out?
Sure. Email is best. And my email address is Lawrence, my first name, LAWRENCE, @Brody-Pennell.com. That's BRODYPENNELL. 2 N's, 2 L's. And I'm always happy to help. I like to pay it forward, right? I learned a lot of great stuff from a lot of smart people, and it's helped me. And I'm always happy to help people that need it. So
awesome! This truly has been an hour plus time of just gaining that compressed education. And there's so much more. We really appreciate you sharing with us today, Lawrence. And the final question that I just want to ask you here is, on your personal journey in 2023, what is the key focus for Lawrence this year?
That's a good question. I think that there's a lot of things that I can do better, right? I've been doing this a long time and I don't have all the answers, but, I just, how they always say, just try to be 1% better every day. If I can just spend a little more time with my young technicians, do one extra training meeting to explain to them the importance and the benefits of a service agreement, or what IAQ products make the most sense for our customers. If I can spend a little more time in our call center and, let those folks know that, that we care and that we want this to be the kind of place to work that we promised it would be when we hired them. We talked a lot about recruiting, but the retention of people is so important. And, and that's really an important note, is that you make these promises to people and you have to deliver. You have to stay in touch with them. You can't hire somebody and they're working for you for 2 weeks and they feel lost and they don't know where to go and they feel out of place and they don't feel trained. And if you're talking to them constantly, you know this stuff and you can handle it. But if you don't, they become disillusioned. They're going to want to leave. So employee retention is probably what I need to work on the most this next year, just making sure all the people are happy, that we're meeting our promises, and to keep recruiting, just keep building a great company that we're proud of and keep making our customers happy.
That's a great place to leave it there, Lawrence. Thank you so much for taking some time and sharing all of your vast amount of knowledge with us, even if it was just for a short period. We really appreciate it, and I know that our guests will as well. It has been so good. If you have questions for Lawrence, make sure that you reach out to him on the methods of communication that he provided. And again, Lawrence, thank you so much for being with us today.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great talking to you, buddy. I look forward to catching up again, and let's do another episode next year.
Sounds good. I'm game.
See you, man.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, that's a wrap for this episode. We hope that you enjoyed our podcast with Lawrence Castillo. So incredible to have that amount of knowledge in such a short period of time. It took him years and decades to gain it, and we're so thankful that we were able to have him on today. Hope that you were able to gain something from the many topics that we discussed, and I encourage you to take that and go deep on it, right? That's something that I think we believe in here in terms of making the most of the knowledge that we have and then applying it to what we can do. We hope that you are finding this podcast to be beneficial. Leave us a 5-star review if you have some time. We'd sure appreciate it. And leave us a comment. We'd like to know what you're thinking about it and what you'd like to hear as we explore 2023. That's it for this show, and we hope that you have found it beneficial to you. We want to leave you now with our challenge, which is to wake up every single morning and choose to waste no day.